North America's landscapes are rich and diverse, with each ecosystem being home to different kinds of animals. In the humid swamps, you'll find giant reptiles lurking amongst the vegetation, and in the colder northern forests, you can observe some of the largest deer on this planet, and the many predators that try to take them down. Because the many ecosystems in this region are sometimes harsh and unforgiving, the animals that inhabit them have some very useful adaptations, and they've evolved to be extremely hardy and adaptable. These tools and skills have allowed them to take over distant lands when they've been given the opportunity to, and in today's video I'll be going through some of the most successful American invaders. To feature in this video, the invader must have established populations on at least 2 other continents, and we'll start off with one of the largest land animals on the North American continent. The elk is the second largest deer species after the moose, and this means that only the largest and smartest predators can target them. As I'm sure many of you already know, North America is not the only continent that this giant mammal is native to, as it also calls parts of East Asia and Eurasia home. This just illustrates how hardy and adaptable the elk is, because across their giant range they have to deal with a wide variety of predators and threats. In North America, they have to dodge attacks from bears, wolves, and cougars, and it's a similar story in Asia, but instead of cougars, it faces the formidable Siberian tiger. It would be a mistake to think of elk as defenseless, as fully grown males can easily fight off and even kill predators. In Yellowstone National Park, bears will almost exclusively target weak or young elk, as dealing with fully grown bull elk can lead to their death. Because this formidable creature is too hard for most predators to dispatch, when it's introduced into less competitive ecosystems without large apex predators, it can quickly take over and dominate the native species. One distant nation where this has occurred is New Zealand, and their invasion dates back to the early 19th century. This is when 18 Rocky Mountain elk were released at the head of George Sound, and it turns out that the animals were a generous gift from the American president. Theodore Roosevelt gifted 10 elk to New Zealand, and the government purchased the other 8. I think this might be one of the only cases where a president has been involved in an invasive species introduction, and this decision is still having massive negative effects on New Zealand's ecosystem today. There is only one true, free-ranging herd of elk in the country today, but the animals in this herd aren't completely pure. Unfortunately, elk aren't the only deer species that have been introduced into New Zealand, as 5 other species from around the world have been brought to these shores over the years. The red deer is one of the many deer that now thrive in New Zealand, and as they are closely related to elk, they are known to hybridize with one another. Because of this, the elk in New Zealand are slightly smaller than the elk in North America, but they still have a massive effect on the native species. Because New Zealand is an island ecosystem that's been separated from the rest of the world for millions of years, it has lots of endemic species, and the plants have suffered the most after the introduction of the deer. They overgraze and trample many of the native plants, and the fact that they have no predators but man means that they can multiply rapidly. To have a place on this list, you need to be a conqueror of more than one continent, and luckily for the elk, it's also taken over parts of South America. As I covered briefly in a recent video, in the early 20th century, elk and red deer were introduced into Argentina. They were originally introduced by the European settlers for hunting opportunities, but today they are causing problems by competing with the native species. The endangered South Andean deer is forced to compete with this much larger intruder, but some native predators are known to fight back. South American cougars will occasionally pick off red deer and elk, but they have little effect on their overall numbers in the region. So even when they're faced with large apex predators, they can still conquer non-native ecosystems, and the elk has to be one of the most successful North American invaders. The North American beaver is one of America's most iconic animals, and it's a species that's very important to all of the ecosystems that it inhabits. They are renowned for their ability to build structures out of nothing but wood, mud, stones, and vegetation, and some of the most impressive examples can be seen from space. This ability is rivaled by no other animal apart from man, and it not only benefits the beavers, as it also benefits a whole host of aquatic and semi-aquatic species. Because of the beneficial impacts of having them around, they are often referred to as ecosystem engineers, but today they build their homes and dams in 3 of the 7 continents on this planet. Eurasia also has a beaver species of its own, and even though they were almost completely wiped out due to hunting and habitat loss, they have made an astonishing comeback and their numbers are increasing today. Strangely, in some parts of Europe, if you spend some time moving from one lake to another, you'll be able to encounter both the Eurasian beaver and the North American beaver. Like most other animal introductions, this story is more than a little complicated, as it was both intentional and unintentional. At one point in time, the Eurasian beaver and the North American beaver were thought to be the same species, so when the Eurasian beaver was at real risk of extinction, it was decided that beavers from North America were to be introduced into Europe. The first introduction of beavers took place in Finland in 1937, but not all of them were from North America. 17 Eurasian beavers were introduced from Norway, and 7 North American beavers were introduced from across the Atlantic. Despite being outnumbered, the North American beaver proved to be more successful in Finland, and by the turn of the century, around 90% of the beavers in Finland were North American beavers, with an estimated population of around 12,000. This is one of only a few cases where North American and European animals have battled for dominance of an ecosystem, and unfortunately for the native beavers, they lost out in this case. If these semi-aquatic rodents weren't happy with just conquering one other continent, luckily for them they can now be found in the waters near the southern tip of the Americas. Patagonia is home to some of the most beautiful and remote landscapes in the world, and wherever you look here you can find strange and distinctive animals. On land you can come across guanacos, rheas, and the famous cats who hunt them, and along the coast you can spot pinnipeds and penguins that almost seem out of place. As I've previously mentioned, this beautiful ecosystem is not free of invasive species, and the North American beaver is one of the worst. In 1946, the Argentine government introduced 20 beavers from Canada to try and establish a fur trade in the region, but this bright idea would go on to cause millions of dollars of damage in southern Patagonia. Today, Tierra del Fuego is one of the worst affected areas, with an estimated beaver population of around 100,000 individuals. The lack of predators in Tierra del Fuego and the reluctance of the local people to hunt the beavers are the main reasons behind their success, and even though they benefit other species across their native range, it's a different story in South America. They cause the destruction of riparian trees, and they are also able to change the structure and direction of rivers, disrupting the native plant and animal life. There are some very expensive plans to try and remove the beavers in the future, but for now they will continue to build their structures a very long way from home. Raccoons are among the most characterful and endearing mammals in North America, as they always seem to be up to some kind of mischief. To many in North America, they are seen as a pest and a negative species to have around, and this is mostly due to their dumpster diving habits. Despite this, they are loved around the world, and they have some very interesting adaptations. They have some of the most sensitive hands or front paws in the animal kingdom, and this helps them to search for food in muddy, shallow waters. This is why they are referred to as wash bears in certain parts of Europe, and it only adds to their charming persona. Like other animals that have learnt to adapt to urban areas, they are known for their intelligence, and they are able to adapt to a variety of different climates and habitats. These are both essential qualities for an invasive species, and today they have massive populations outside of North America. As I've covered the story of how they became established in Japan so many times, I'll keep it brief, but their journey into the country started in the 1970s. Raccoons were very popular pets at the time due to the success of an anime series. And when animals are kept as pets, they usually find their way into the wild. The exact number of raccoons in Japan is very hard to estimate, but around 1,300 raccoons were caught in Tokyo in 2022. Their presence is very bad news for the native species, and this is especially the case for animals in the same ecological niche. The tanuki or Japanese raccoon dog is a canid endemic to Japan, and even though they share a common name, they are not very closely related to raccoons. They get their common name due to the markings on their face, and in Japan they live a very similar life to the raccoons. They do very well in urban areas, and they are a big part of the Japanese culture and history. Because the raccoons can negatively affect the tanuki and other endemic species, there are attempts to control them in Japan, but this is easier said than done. These sneaky mammals are present in a few other areas across the northern hemisphere, with Europe being another stronghold for the raccoon. Today there are an estimated 1.5 to 2 million raccoons in Germany, and they have been inhabiting the country since the 1930s. This was when they were introduced to try and kickstart a raccoon fur farming industry, but by the end of the war, many of them had escaped and started living a new life in the wild. Even though they have some predators in Europe, there are far more across their native range, so really life in Germany was a lot easier for them, and because they are so adaptable and intelligent, they were able to multiply very quickly. Even though Germany is the worst affected country in Europe, there is a long list of European countries that have been invaded by raccoons, and it's likely that they'll never fully be under control on the continent. The pond slider can be found in the rivers and lakes of the southeastern US, and it has 3 subspecies across its range. The red-eared slider is arguably the most famous of the pond slider subspecies, and this is due to the fact that they are very popular pets. This is how they have invaded so many countries around the world, and just like the raccoon, they seem to like the weather in Japan. The first sightings of pond sliders in the wild in Japan occurred in the 1950s, and today their population in the country is thought to be an astonishing 8 million. This is a massive problem for the native species, especially Japan's native turtles. The Japanese pond turtle is losing this war and is in desperate need of help, as their numbers are now dwarfed by the red-eared slider, with them numbering just under 1 million individuals. Of course, pond sliders aren't the only semi-aquatic or aquatic creatures from the Americas to have invaded Japan, as there are many fish, amphibians and rodents that have also made the trip and decided to stay. Pond sliders, and more specifically the red-eared slider, have the perfect recipe to become an invasive pet, because they are relatively cheap, they don't get very big, and they are relatively cheap to feed. The only downside for most owners is that they can live for up to 30 years, and despite the fact that they are very fun pets, this is really quite a commitment. This leads to a large percentage of owners releasing them into the wild, and because they are the world's most commonly traded reptile, it only makes sense that they are one of the most widespread invasive reptiles in the world. These crafty reptiles have even taken over parts of Africa and its many competitive ecosystems, with them being present in South Africa and many of the African islands. As well as competing with the native species in the area, they also endanger them through transmitting diseases, and this is made worse by the fact that they have found their way into the wild through the pet trade. Animals in the pet trade are usually exposed to more diseases and parasites, so when they are released or if they escape, the parasites and diseases spread very quickly. The pond slider's story might not have as many twists and turns as other animals featured in this video, but it's arguably the most successful American invader. It seems as though the pet trade is the easiest way to achieve world domination, as today this little turtle has established populations in every single continent apart from Antarctica. Because of their ability to take over ecosystems, they have landed themselves on the 100 worst invasive species list, and it's likely that they'll never fully be controlled in all of the countries that they have invaded. Of course, there are quite a few more American animals that could have featured in this video, so if you'd like to see a part 2, then let me know down in the comments below. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.